Mike Cannon-Brookes was not impressed by ScoMo's massive U-turn. What's going on? I thought this was all done to appease the climate lovies.
No, he was not impressed at all, and neither was Simon Holmes à Court. All these billionaires that Scott Morrison is trying to bring around and to appease with this massive U-turn, well, they're not happy at all. And I can tell you, Simon Holmes à Court has got this group that is put together, Climate 200. They've already raised a couple of $1 million in a few short weeks, and they're going to be having campaigns in every seat where they see the Liberals are susceptible. Like, they're going to do a Zali Steggall in every seat where they think they can get a percentage of the vote to change the outcome and get their candidate, or perhaps Labor or some other independent, into that seat. So if Scott Morrison thought that giving in here was going to change and remove the pressure of these activists, he is sorely mistaken.
James, explain this to me, because I'm completely baffled. I don't understand why Scott Morrison completely trashes the Liberal brand, completely alienates the quiet Australians who voted for him in order to appease the billionaires, renewables investors by committing to net zero, and they're not interested. They don't want to know what's going on.
Rowan, there was one word in that line you just had, which sums the whole thing up. Investors, okay? So people like Mike Cannon-Brookes, people like Simon Holmes à Court, they're all very heavily exposed in renewable investments. Mike Cannon-Brookes has tons of solar in Queensland. We all know about Simon Holmes à Court. The whole idea that, what they need is policy changes to get more solar power into the grid to make their investments pay off. We see this with all sorts of, people in all these seats like Wentworth and North Sydney, across the country in these very posh electorates where there's a lot of people who are going to do very well off of this shift to renewable energy. So that's one thing that you have to keep in mind. There's a lot of self-interest here. It's not just about saving the planet. But the other thing, too, I think voters need to be really, really sophisticated here, because one of the things that they're trying to do with these sort of independents and voices of sorts of campaigns that they do, is repeat that Zali Steggall magic, if that's exactly the word for it, that happened at the last election. Well, it's not going to happen. And one of the reasons why is that voters know that if they wind up with one of these voices of so-called independent candidates as their local member is not going to be able to bring home anything to their electorate. And that's something else that also needs to play into the electoral calculus here.
Yeah, well, earlier on we had Matthias Cormann on Sky, and I tell you, this bloke talking about investments and money, he's now heading up the OECD. What a disgrace! He was squirming worse than a mussel in a bowl of mussels in a Brussels cafe on the hook. The way he was being questioned, and what hypocrisy and humbug. Oh, no, yes, we can do it without taxes, but we might need taxes. Unbelievable. And Barnaby Joyce was no better. They have trashed their brand thoroughly, the Liberals and the Nationals. Trashed their brand. Sorry, Rita.
And gone back on everything they have said in the past. I mean, unless they think their voters are absolute mugs, absolute imbeciles who've got collective amnesia and do not remember we had the climate change election a couple of years ago and the coalition won, and now they've embraced the policy of their opponents, and all the arguments they made against that policy still stand today.
Exactly.
The cost. I mean, they've signed up to a plan without costing it. There's no costs. Plus, they have got no way to actually tell us how we will achieve these aims. It's all
well, there's not exactly, Rita. It's not only that there's no plan, there's no technology. We'll be discussing this with Ian Plimer later. But James.
Yeah, well, but the politics of, before we even get to the technology of it, Rita is absolutely right. Scott Morrison said this week when he announced his plan, he said, taxation is not the way we're going to do this. Technology is. Well, technology is fine, but why isn't nuclear in the mix there? That's the first question. Absolutely. That's a proven technology. But number two, taxation absolutely is in the mix, because every single time you subsidize one of these renewable projects, whether it's, redoing a power grid so you can feed solar into it, or building Snowy Hydro, or whatever, that is coming out of general consolidated revenue. Sorry, that is tax. We are absolutely being taxed for all of these green schemes so that we can, get green climate investors and the banks on board. But this is very, very much looking more and more like it is we're going to shut down all of the industries that make Australia profitable and a powerful first world nation so that we can appease a bunch of bankers who don't care about us and transfer money from people who make good livings in the coal industry, in the mining industry, and all of these carbon intensive industries. Take that money and send it right up the line to these investors and banks and other people like that who do not care one whit. And they say, oh, well, no one's going to lose their job. Everybody will be fine. I do not see how that you can say that with a straight face one bit.
And it's a double taxation, James and Rita, because yes, what the money comes out of consolidated revenue from the governments to, like New South Wales has just given $3 billion to hydrogen, so that comes off the taxpayer. But then the taxpayer gets hit again when they get all their electricity bills and the prices have gone up because they've had to build this or build that. So it's double taxation. It's a complete lie.